Hey, what's going on, everybody? Jason here. We're going to continue our series on the topic of exile and empire. And the title of this talk is the Deus ex machina. And I'm going to define that as we go. Before we do, though, I always like to give a recap of what we've seen thus far. Last time we talked about the topic of the death of God. And we looked at the cross of Christ, the crucifixion. We kind of appealed to 1 Corinthians 1 and 2, and especially to Colossians chapter 2. And it was there that we saw that the cross wasn't just the occasion of Jesus' death, but rather Paul makes it clear that the cross is where God put to death the entire, what I've argued is a serpentine system of doing spirituality, right? We've been talking about how that there is this void, this lack, this sense of inner antagonism, ambiguity, struggle that we feel within ourselves and within the world, and that we assume incorrectly that this is not supposed to be there, that it's not supposed to be this way. And I argued that the reason we think that is because the serpent in the Garden of Eden suggested such a thing to Adam and Eve. The serpent said, hey, you're supposed to feel whole and complete. There's something missing. God is trying to keep it from you. If you just transgress the prohibition and eat that apple, you'll have that sense of wholeness and completeness that you desire. And we've seen that this exact mentality is what lies behind the majority of evangelistic preaching in this country. You go to any American megachurch, even not a megachurch, just almost any evangelical church in this country, and you're going to hear some version of that serpentine message. Are you sad? Are you heartbroken? Are you struggling in your marriage? Do you have financial woes? Well, just come to Jesus. You know, you've tried everything else. You've tried the drugs and the power and the sex and the alcohol and the money, the fame. Well, you're correct in seeking to avoid the void. You're just pushing the wrong button on the vending machine. Press the Jesus button, and you'll get that sense of completeness that you desire. And so we've seen that, you know, this mentality, this serpentine gospel, as it were, has at its heart what I've been calling a sacred object, right? The sacred object being God and the sense of wholeness and completeness that he brings with him if we just jump through the right hoops, tick all the right boxes, and so on. And we've been seeing that entire system has been put to death. This system where the goal is to get you on some hamster wheel, right? The goal is to get you on some treadmill. And as long as you do this, as long as you're baptized, as long as you have the baptism of the Holy Spirit or speak in tongues, as long as you have an effective prayer life or a quiet time, a devotional time every day, as long as you do this, that, and the other thing, you'll get that sense of wholeness that you desire, and all your problems will go away. And we saw last time that this entire system is idolatrous, that this God, who supposedly is this kind of genie in a bottle who gives you everything you desire if you just do this, that, and the other thing, is an idol. And the sooner we become atheists to this idol God, the better and the closer we'll be to discovering what, if anything, God is, right? And so that's kind of a bit more of what we're going to talk about in this talk. An illustration occurred to me last time after I gave my last talk, because we talked a lot in the last seminar, or whatever you want to call these things, about the rending of the veil, right? And when Jesus was dying on the cross, it says that as he was breathing his last, the veil in the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. That thick curtain that separated the inner sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, from the rest of the temple. And it was believed that the presence of God, the God in all of his blinding, unflinching, unmixed, unmitigated holiness, dwells within the veil. And that's why no one could go back there. That's why that veil was there to quarantine the sacred from the profane, divinity from humanity. And the high priest once a year could go back within the veil on the Day of Atonement to offer an offering of atonement for his own sins and the sins of the people. The book of Hebrews talks a lot about this. And, you know, the idea that the holiness of God could be unleashed upon sinful humanity would conjure up images not unlike what we talked about last time in Raiders of the Lost Ark, that Harrison Ford film, where the Nazis capture the Ark of the Covenant, and they, in their greed and desire to wield this power that they imagine dwells within the Ark, they open it, and the fury of God is unleashed. Their faces melt off their skulls. It's horrific. And this is what, as we saw last time, what one would have expected if the veil were torn, or if someone were to venture behind it without authorization. But instead what we saw was that the veil was torn and nothing happened. Nothing was there, nothing came out, no one got zapped. Instead, presumably, the priests just sewed it back up and continued the charade. And the illustration I thought of after I gave my last talk, which I thought was kind of humorous, and I wish I'd put it in there, but I'll say it now, is that of pantsing. Anybody remember pantsing? Think back to junior high, or as they call it sometimes, middle school. You'd be in PE, right? And you're in your PE uniform or whatever. You got your shirt and your elastic waistband shorts. And, if someone were to sneak up behind you and just grab the sides of your shorts and just pull them down, right? And so now you're exposed in your tighty-whities or whatever you got on, your underoos. And it was meant to sort of, ridicule, humiliate, make a mockery of somebody, to expose them. And I do think that there is an illustration there. It's not quite worked out yet, and so I haven't quite, put the dotted the I's and crossed the T's on this. But there is a sense in which, it seems to me, because of Colossians 2, 13 to 15 that we looked at last time, where Paul says that in the crucifixion, God has nailed to the cross that handwriting of requirements, that those legal requirements that was against us. Paul says he nailed it to the cross. Speaking, of course, of the Mosaic law, the Mosaic economy, the entire sacrificial priestly economy of Moses, what's called the Old Covenant. Paul says God actually killed this system, which I've been calling serpentine. This system has been nailed to the cross. And Paul even says that he made a public spectacle of the principalities and powers, triumphing over them in it. He made a mockery of the principalities and powers. What does that mean? Well, I think that's Paul's way of saying, speaking of demonic entities, right? Because, we read in Ephesians, I think it's Ephesians, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers and authorities in heavenly places, right? The rulers of this present darkness. He calls them principalities and powers, and that's what he calls them in Colossians 2. So there's a sense in which this entire system, which on some level is being driven by the devil, these principalities and powers, which is why Jesus rebuked Peter and called him Satan when Peter suggested that he could avoid the void and get the crown without the cross. Jesus says to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan, you're not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men." That God is, as it were, pantsing the Mosaic economy. God is, as it were, when he tears the veil open and exposes the lie. He tears the veil open from top to bottom and it shows there's nothing there. There is no sacred object that you can attain. There's nothing in there that you, by doing X, Y, or Z, can finally attain. That desire that's been just around the corner, just over the horizon, that you've been searching for. By the rending of the veil and coupling that with what Paul says about God putting them to open shame. God has made a mockery. God has disarmed principalities and powers. It's akin to getting pantsed in junior high, right? This is where God just exposes the lie for what it is and says that's not the way.